BBC Radio London. It is the Robert Elms Show. It's Gary Crowley looking after the store for this weekend. And there goes Duran Duran. And of course, A View to a Kill, a collaboration, input from the late great John Barry. And that cues the arrival of my first of many, many guests over the next couple of hours. As I was saying to Riz a little bit earlier on, a book that I'm so enjoying at the moment is Bond, Queer Bond, the fabulous Other History of a Spy. It's out there now and it's published by the History Press, and I'm pleased to say, to tell us more, is the author, Mark O'Connell. It's lovely to meet you.
Thank you. Hello.
And did you like your introduction music?
I love my introduction. When you said which Bond song, I mean, you won't play this, but you play Duran Duran, so I'm a happy Bond fan right now.
I mean, there's a couple of Duran songs that I like. I quite like that one. Girls on Film I was always rather partial to. Also, Is There Something I Should Know? And Skin Trade, I thought was an absolute fantastic song. But we're not here to talk about Duran Duran.
No.
Well, actually...
we are a bit. Yeah,
I was going to say...
They're in the mix of this one, yeah.
They are, because I'm asking the listeners this morning, and this is getting a terrific reaction. What was the first Bond film that you saw?
Right, I love
and what did you think of it, and where did you see it? Because we've lost so many of these great cinemas here in the capital.
Well, I've loved hearing all like the Barnet Odeon and Streatham Odeon. Mine was the Guildford Odeon, June '83, a Saturday afternoon. It was a divorced parent Saturday, and my dad was taking me along to see it, and I had a mega meltdown in the lobby of the cinema.
Did you? You remember that?
Oh yeah. Because I wanted to see Return of the Jedi again, and but my grandfather. This is a little side story, but my grandfather worked on all the Bond films. He worked with the Cubby Broccoli family for 30 years. This is Jimmy. Yeah. So it was important. I went to see it, and I remember I was barely 7 years old. Go to see Octopussy 1983, but I loved it. I just loved the adventure and the gymnastic women, and I remember sort of watching the titles because it was one of those cinemas where everyone was smoking. So all those Bond titles were kind of creating massive sort of smoke reflections throughout the whole auditorium. I remember watching the 007 logo trailing through the smoke above me at the Guildford Odeon.
You've so reminded me about smoking in
only
cinema.
on one half though, because that was the other half couldn't have it. Yeah,
but those insane kind of plumes of smoke that you would see sort of moving across the auditorium. So the Guildford Odeon, Octopussy, and is that still there, Mark? Is that still
the building is, which is a good thing, but it's been, as they always are, converted into flats.
Okay, right. Now, something else before we talk about the book that I wanted to ask you about was, of course, we've been hearing that the new owners of the Bond franchise is Amazon MGM. So, I wanted to ask you, because they've announced that the kind of team, haven't they?
Yes.
Who are going to make the film. And this includes director Denis Villeneuve, Amy Pascal and David Heyman are going to be producing. Stephen Knight, who of course wrote Peaky Blinders, is going to be right. Yeah. What have you made of that team?
It's not a bad team. As soon as I saw the name of those two producers, Amy Pascal and David Heyman, I went, oh, yes. They're a bit like Barbara Broccoli and the whole Broccoli Bond family that kept it going for 60 years. These new producers have grown up with cinema, and David Heyman and Amy Pascal, collectively between them, they've been responsible in recent years for Barbie and Project Hail Mary, and they've done really well as big action entertainment blockbusters. So I'm kind of happy that Bond's going to possibly go into a real entertainment groove for its next incarnation.
Good. Well, that all sounds good. That all sounds positive. I mean, the $64,000 or the $64 million question now, taking into consideration inflation. Who would you like to see? You're a Bond scholar, a Bond expert. Who would you like to see in the role? I mean, there's been talk of Aaron Taylor-Johnson, hasn't there? And Callum Turner. I like Callum Turner.
Yeah, he's not wrong.
Kind of got that sort of physicality, isn't he? Tom Francis, there's been rumours, Mark, has actually auditioned for the role. Yeah.
Well, it's a weird thing. They announced that they're now looking for the next James Bond, when I think that's been happening for the last 3 or 4 years. But now officially Nina Gold, the casting director, she discovered people like Richard Madden and Kit Harington, doing all her previous work. So I'm kind of, I'm hopeful and feel it's all in good hands. My Bond choice, I'd say, I've always liked Aaron Taylor-Johnson, partly because I've met him and we got mutual friends, and he's a lovely, lovely guy. And when I saw Bullet Train, which is a great sort of Japanese action thriller, he kind of conveyed both Daniel Craig and Roger Moore. I was like, wow, he's kind of doing a bit of both. Another actor, Kingsley Ben-Adir, who's one of the dancing Kens in Barbie. I just looked at him and went, you look like a 60s Connery.
It's great that we've all got our own sort of interpretation, haven't we?
Best songs, best actors, best films.
Yeah. Let's talk about this this book that I'm enjoying. Basically the light bulb moment, the spark that ignited you writing this, and why you felt it was important to write, and why now as well.
Well, I'd done a Bond book back in 2012, which was kind of my Nick Hornby fever pitch, my Bond fan childhood, called Catching Bullets, and that kind of did great things. And then I thought, 10 plus years later, have I got another one? And I was very conscious also, sadly, regrettably, that LGBT histories and mechanisms and initiatives are being they've become political collateral to be thrown under certain parties' buses. And I thought, hang on, that Bond has this gay history and this LGBT input, and I thought, this does have a book. And then for a little while I was like, is there enough? I don't want it to be sort of just loose connective tissue.
Filling,
and then in the end it became it wasn't connective tissue, it was bone marrow, it was blood, it was spine, and that's what kind of many light bulbs. I was literally having 2 light bulbs light a day going, oh my god, this is a thing. So and I just wanted to look at the gay creatives and the artists and the consumption of the Bond franchise, and to kind of I love the delicious prospect that the openly straight James Bond does have this very gay history, and that's what I wanted to celebrate in this fabulous other history.
Well, I'm about sort of I'm loving it, as I said, and I could be here until the cows come home talking about people that I'd never heard of and have discovered, and it's kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. Maybe you can sort of tell us a little bit more about the influence of Ian Fleming's friend and literary editor William Plomer. What an amazing man he sounds.
Totally.
I mean, again, I'd never heard of Richard Dickie Chopping.
Dickie Chopping, a hero of mine now. Yeah.
Well, again, a massive influence. I mean, he was the illustrator for the initial run of the books, I think. So
William Plomer was this publishing editor who worked for Jonathan Cape Publishers, but in the 50s, but perhaps 10 years before that, in the early 40s, he was also on the same intelligence desk as Ian Fleming. And they were creating the weekly naval intelligence reports. And at the time, William Plomer was a younger man, and it was wartime, and people still needed, the connections and warmth of another. And he propositioned the wrong sailor at a train station in London, and kind of got felt the heavy thumb of the law. But ultimately Fleming and his naval colleagues got William Plomer off the rap because they realised there was more important things. And what William Plomer later did in sort of 52, 53, when Fleming's in Jamaica crafting Casino Royale, the first novel, William Plomer recognised not only the potential of this book but the potential of others, and he saw Bond as a series. And later he even said, I wonder if they could make a film of this Moonraker novel, and they did brilliantly years later. So Plomer kind of pushed Fleming. They both sort of massaged each other's egos. And then someone like Richard Chopping, who's this great botanical illustrator who Fleming brought in 4 or 5 books in because he wanted a slightly different style of artistry. And Chopping was this, he would have no problem with me saying, this promiscuous, hell-raising character that lived with his partner. He was best friends with Francis Bacon, and the 3 of them would sort of tear up gay London and straight London. And Fleming wanted Chopping to do the covers, and then suddenly these were the covers that JFK saw at the White House because he was a big Bond fan. And those covers and those Richard Chopping designs kind of accidentally made JFK name From Russia with Love as his best book that year. And then Arthur Krim, head of United Artists, friend of JFK, went, I wonder if there's a film series in these books. So it's the connective tissue and the sort of timeline where gay history and Bond history, and then also British history and European history, it all just came together. And as I say, every day I was having my whole desk was just lit up by too many light bulbs almost.
I bet. And talking about that British and that kind of sort of European influence as well, I mean, we've got to talk about Lionel Bart.
Yes, totally.
Mark, I had the pleasure of meeting him.
I hoped you did. I felt you guys would.
A couple of times. We used to do a show a few years ago called My London. He would have been an absolute dream guest for that. Yeah. But just a lovely fella, exuded warmth and loveliness. But let's talk about Lionel's kind of part in the Bond story, because again, absolutely pivotal, wasn't it? I mean, he sort of set the framework for the theme songs.
If a gay guy helped push Fleming to write the books and another gay guy helped brand them, then when it comes to the films, Lionel Bart, he didn't just create the first Bond song, he created a new musical template, where music and pop popular culture meet. It was like this great duet, and it was Bart that first did that. Second Bond film, we'd had Dr. No in 62, but that had more sort of Jamaican club beats that were
underneath my man.
Yeah, and all of that, and Jump Up, and all those great Byron Lee tracks.
That was on the telly, Mark, last Sunday. I'd finished presenting Robert's programme on Sunday. I got home at about 2:15, and it was just starting.
Perfect.
And I hadn't watched Dr. No for a good few years. Just so enjoyed
it's
it.
Slick. It's still
it
slick.
It is slick. I mean, the pace, though, compared, obviously...
Yeah, a little more languid,
a little bit more languid, but so enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I mean, was there a more beautiful couple than Sean Connery and Ursula Andress?
That was one of the pulls as well. Everyone says, oh, the Bond films, are they sexist? You know, poor Ursula Andress coming out of the sea in a bikini she designed, and then it became a global sensation. But also Connery. He's there in tight wet denim with his chest fur, and he's looking quite hot. And that's the thing that I realised, I remember once watching, I think it was Dr. No, my mum walked through and she kind of had a look at Connery. I went, oh, and then that turned me off because I'm not going to fancy the Bond my mum fancied. That would be just all sorts of weird. But Dr. No happened in 62. So 63 we have From Russia with Love, and the two producers, Broccoli and Saltzman, they were quite savvy to the commerciability of Bond and just selling it. And they, at that time in the 50s, early 60s, there was a lot of songs written for feature films, and Lionel Bart would write them for sort of Tommy Steele movies and B sort of kids teen movies, some of which Broccoli produced. So Lionel Bart comes in and he writes From Russia with Love that Matt Monro sings, and I had a really beautiful input on the Lionel Bart chapter from another great Londoner, David Arnold, who's one of Bond composer, and he's a great guy, and he helped me so much on this book. And in fact, when I interviewed him about Lionel Bart, that's when I realised there is a book here. And he said that Lionel, and he knew him as well, and he said he spent a lot of his money on maybe the wrong things, and after Things Ain't What They Used to Be and Oliver, David said, anyone that writes Where Is Love was not maybe having any. And we forget this, that these three names already, Plumer, Chopping, Bart, they're creating a template for how a new era of movie masculinity and heroism's presented, but it's not legal for them to love. And that's what that was another thing. I wanted to sort of give some flowers and plaudits to these people that have put Bond where it is, but don't necessarily get their garlands. I mean,
obviously, if we can talk about the sort of research side, I mean, so many of the people that you write about aren't with us anymore. You talked about interviewing David Arnold. What other kind of people would you have interviewed for?
Well, I got so Richard Chopping, the sort of the guy that looks after his estate and was a close friend of his, a beautiful guy called John List Turner, who's an Art World name. He kind of said, he gave me beautiful insight, beautiful interviews, and also said, use any imagery you want. And that's, in this sort of rights world, that was a real good bonus. So I could use some of these Fleming covers because he owned the rights to them. But I got other people, I went to Barbara Broccoli because I wanted to talk to her about her father pre-Dr. No. He made an Oscar Wilde movie, which is, I heavily urge you, it's legitimately on at least one very big global platform, and it's a stunning film, and Cubby would not cut it. He would not trim it for slightly scared Christian censors in the US. He said, no, I'm not changing it. And he lost money and he lost reputation and he lost momentum. So he needed a hit fast. And that's when he slipped into the Bond world. And I always thought if Cubby hadn't stood by his ground with the Oscar Wilde movie, then we might not have had Bond. And that's what Barbara Broccoli, the Bond producer for many years, helped me with. I would not have been able to write this book with about 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, because the internet, as jagged and horrible as it can be, it's also a brilliant registry and deposit for different histories and curations. And even something like William Plumer, I looked up his address and I found his house on one of the estate agent websites. So I was able to look inside his house, and then I realised, that was the lounge. That's where he would have read Fleming's manuscripts to pass back notes. So it was a massive. I mean, even now I'm finding out stuff. I'm like, why did I not know that a year ago? The research journey is still going on, oddly.
Well, look, listen, I have so enjoyed it, and it's out there now. I mean, what one final question? You spent a lot of time sort of working on this. What are you hoping that Bond fans and non-Bond fans get out of this book?
Well, it's a rich history of how how the arts that we love, the movies and the books that we love are made. They're not always made in a straight vacuum. Nothing is, and in times where sort of gay visibility and presence is again being questioned, I think, well, don't. And James Bond was fine with it. If he's fine with it, then let's all move on.
Lovely to meet you, Mark. Have
Thank
a
you,
lovely
Gary.
weekend. The book Bond, Queer Bond, The Fabulous Other History of a Spy is out now. I mean, just going back to the Amazon MGM, and them being in the driving seat now. Why is it taking so long? I mean, how many years ago was it before?
Well, Daniel Craig was the Bond 20 years ago, so he's been in the role for 20 years at the moment. I think it was Craig did create a second golden era like Connery, so it was it was very hard to replace Connery. They kind of stumbled-ish with Lazenby, and then they got Connery back, and then Roger Moore. So it's not an easy pair of shoes to fill. And it's also, where is masculinity? Where is our heroes right now? It's the Broccoli's. If they couldn't get it right, it's going to be a slow progress for others, but they will. They're probably getting it right already.
And I haven't asked you yet your favourite Bond. I mean, you mentioned George Lazenby.
Yes,
I have to say, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of my favourite Bond films. It's one of the
best Bond films.
I always thought if he'd been allowed to have continued, why did he sort of? Why was he pulled?
That's because he wasn't Sean Connery, I think. And the film, I agree with you. It's directed by Peter Hunt, who was the gay editor of all the Bond films in the 60s, and then he directed that in 69. I think it didn't quite hit the ground running in the way the studios and the box office needed. But time has been brilliant to that film. But I think Lazenby is great in the role. He's fine in the role. It's such a great package, and it's one of the few Bond films that's really beautifully tied to the novel, and it works because of that.
Okay. What next?
A rest, a holiday,
enjoy
a orange drink on a beach somewhere. Yes,
lovely. Thanks for giving us some of your time. Lovely talking to author writer Mark O'Connell. We're going to try and squeeze in a couple of tracks.